The lawyer's face goes white as paper. His hands grip the witness stand armrests so hard his knuckles turn the color of old bones. The courtroom holds its breath, every eye fixed on him, every ear straining. He stares at me like I'm a ghost risen from the grave. "It's you," he whispers. The words hang in the air between us. 3 decades collapse into this single moment. The mahogany benches creak as people lean forward, someone's pen drops. The sound echoes like a gunshot in the silence. "Say my name," I tell him. My voice doesn't shake anymore. "Hi, viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is." His throat works, once, twice. Behind those expensive tortoiseshell glasses, his eyes are wide with something that looks like terror. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead. I can smell the floor wax and old leather and fear. "Marguerite Chen," he finally says. The courtroom explodes. Reporters surge forward, their phones already out, fingers flying across screens. The judge bangs his gavel, but nobody's listening. My daughter Celestina yanks off her designer sunglasses. Her mouth falls open. She looks from me to the lawyer and back again, her perfectly made-up face crumbling into confusion. "Mom?" Her voice cracks on the word. "What? Who is Marguerite Chen?" But I'm not looking at her anymore. I'm watching Desmond Kincaid crumble on that witness stand. Watching him remember. Watching 30 years of carefully rebuilt confidence drain away like water tea. "Arafa sieve." "For the record," I say, loud enough to cut through the noise, "can you tell the court who Marguerite Chen is?" Judge Morrison slams the gavel 3 times, hard. The sound finally brings order. But the tension doesn't break, it stretches tighter. Desmond swallows. His tie is suddenly too tight. He loosens it with trembling fingers. He stops, starts again. "She was the senior prosecutor who tried the Hernandez case. The biggest corruption trial in state history. And," I prompt, "the one who destroyed me in court 30 years ago." The words come out raw, honest, like confession. She was a legend, undefeated. 12 years, never lost a case. I was her first opponent after Harvard. She dismantled every argument I made. My career nearly ended before it started. Celestina makes a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. And after that case, I continue, my voice steady as stone. "What did you do, Mr. Kincaid?" He meets my eyes, really meets them. There's respect there now. And something else, something that looks like shame. I spent the next 3 decades rebuilding my reputation, learning from that loss, winning every case since then to prove I wasn't the fool you made me look like. The folder sits on the table in front of me. 42 years of my life reduced to documents and evidence. I pick it up. The paper feels heavy, important. "Your Honor," I say, "I'd like to submit Exhibit A." The bailiff walks over, takes the paper from my hand, carries it to Judge Morrison like it's made of glass. The judge adjusts his reading glasses, studies it. His eyebrows climb toward his hairline. "My law degree from Columbia University," I say. "Graduated top of my class, 1979. Celestina's crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. But I can't stop, won't stop. 3 days earlier, I stood in a different place. The cemetery. The casket was mahogany too, polished until I could see my reflection in it. I wore the black dress Hector bought me for our 40th anniversary. The fabric still smelled like his cologne, something woodsy and warm that made my throat close up. Celestina stood on the other side of the grave, dry-eyed behind those designer sunglasses. She didn't cry once during the service, didn't cry when they lowered him into the ground, didn't cry when the priest said the final prayer. I was 63 years old. I'd been Hector's wife for 42 of those years. People called me Marguerite, Mrs. Blackwood to the neighbors, just a housewife to my daughter. The thing about being invisible is that people forget you're watching. 3 days after we buried Hector, Celestina showed up at the house. She didn't knock, just used her key. The one I'd asked for back twice already. She walked past me into the living room where Hector's reading chair still held the shape of him, still wore the indent of his weight. The man with her was younger, maybe 35, his hair slicked back with thing that made it shine under the lights. His briefcase was leather, the expensive kind, the kind that costs more than my monthly grocery budget. "We need to talk about the estate," Celestina said. She didn't ask how I was doing, didn't ask if I was eating, didn't ask anything at all. The man looked at me the way people look at old furniture. The kind you're deciding whether to keep or haul to the curb. This is my lawyer, Celestina said. Desmond Kincaid. I offered them tea. They said no. I made myself a cup anyway, Earl Grey with 2 sugars. Hector always said I had a sweet tooth. I sat in his chair while they stood, the leather still warm from the sun coming through the window. The house, the savings, the investment portfolio. Celestina ticked them off on her manicured fingers, each nail painted the color of fresh blood. It all comes to me as the sole heir. I sipped my tea. Too hot, it burned my tongue. I didn't flinch. Your father's will divides everything equally between us, I said. Desmond opened his briefcase. The sound of papers sliding against leather filled the quiet room. Mrs. Blackwood, your daughter is contesting the will on the grounds that you made no financial contribution to the marriage. You were, as she stated, just a housewife. Just a housewife. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading out, touching everything. I see, I said. We're offering you a settlement. Celestina wouldn't look at me, kept her eyes the window. On the garden where I'd planted roses for 30 years, $20,000, enough for a small apartment and a few years of living expenses if you're careful. $20,000. 42 years of my life, of breakfast made and lunches packed and dinners cooked, of homework helped and scraped knees bandaged and bedtime stories read. All of it worth less than a used car. And if I don't accept, Desmond smiled. His teeth were very white, the kind of white that comes from expensive dentists and regular cleanings. Then we go to court, Mrs. Blackwood, and I assure you, you won't like how that turns out. My firm specializes in estate law. We've never lost a case like this. I set down my teacup. The china clicked against the saucer. A small sound, a nothing sound. I'll see you in court, then. Celestina stood up so fast her purse fell off the couch. The contents spilled across Hector's rug. Lipstick and compact and breath mints scattered like shrapnel. Don't be stupid, Mother. You can't win this. You've never worked a day in your life. You have no money for a lawyer. No assets of your own. I raised you, I said quietly. I thought that was work. She grabbed her purse, shoved everything back inside with shaking hands. Desmond followed her to the door but paused, left his business card on the hall table, the white rectangle stark against the dark wood. Think about it, Mrs. Blackwood, he said. The offer expires in 72 hours. After. They left. I stood at the window, watched Celestina's Mercedes pull away, black and sleek and expensive, like everything else about her new life. Then I went upstairs to the bedroom Hector and I had shared. His cologne still hung in the air. I could almost feel him there beside me. I opened the closet, pushed aside his suits. The fabric whispered against my hands. At the back on the top shelf was an old lockbox. I hadn't opened it in 30 years. Inside was a photograph. My hands shook as I lifted it out, not from fear, from something else. Something that felt like recognition, like coming home. In the photograph, a younger version of me stood in a courtroom. I wore a power suit, navy blue with sharp shoulders, my hair pulled back, severe and professional. In my hand, a leather briefcase just like Desmond's, maybe better. Before I was Marguerite Blackwood, housewife and mother, I was Marguerite Chen, top prosecutor for the state, undefeated in court for 12 years. 93 prosecutions, 93 convictions, no losses, no compromises, no mercy for those who thought they could get away with corruption. I'd given it up when Celestina was born. Hector traveled constantly for work. Someone needed to be home. Someone needed to make sure our daughter had a parent who was actually there, who showed up, who cared. I'd chosen my family. I'd chosen my daughter. I'd chosen to be invisible so she could shine. The photograph showed me on the day I won the Hernandez ASE, the biggest corruption trial in state history. Millions of dollars in bribes, dozens of officials compromised, and one young lawyer who'd been so sure he could win. Fresh out of Harvard, cocky and brilliant and absolutely convinced he was smarter than everyone else. I'd destroyed him that day, methodically, carefully, piece by piece until there was nothing left of his case but rubble and excuses. He'd sworn afterward that he'd never lose again, that he'd learn from his mistake, that he'd become the best estate lawyer in the city. His name was Desmond Kincaid. I put the photograph back in the box, closed the lid. The metal clasp clicked shut. Final. Decided. Then I went downstairs and picked up the phone. My fingers remembered the numbers even after 30 years. Muscle memory. Like riding a bike or swimming. Some things the body never forgets. Records department. A woman's voice answered. I need to request copies of some old case files, I said. The name is Chen. Marguerite Chen. Silence on the other end. Long enough that I thought the line had gone dead. Then, the Marguerite Chen? Yes, I said. That one. 2 weeks. That's how long I had before the court date. 2 weeks to sort through 42 years of life stored in boxes in the basement. 2 weeks to find every shred of evidence that proved I wasn't just a housewife, that I'd never been just anything. The basement smelled like dust and old paper and memories, boxes stacked to the ceiling, each on E labeled in my neat handwriting, each one containing pieces of the life I'd built. I found my law degree in the third box, the paper yellowed at the edges but the gold seal still bright. Columbia University. Top of my class. 1979. A lifetime ago, the bar admission certificate was in the same box, along with my employment records from the district attorney's office. 12 years of service, 12 years of putting criminals behind bars, 12 years of perfect victories. My case records filled 6 boxes, 93 files, 93 wins. Drug dealers and embezzlers and corrupt politicians. All of them so sure they'd walk free. All of them wrong. But that wasn't what would win this case. That was just the foundation. The proof that I'd been somebody before I chose to be nobody. The real evidence was in the other boxes, the ones labeled by year, 42 boxes, one for each year of marriage. I pulled out the first one. 1983. Inside were financial spreadsheets, rows and columns of numbers in my handwriting, every investment tracked, every stock purchase analyzed, every bond evaluated. I'd done this every quarter for 40 years. Kept records of everything because that's what prosecutors do. We document, we prove, we prepare. 70% of the investments that built Hector's fortune came from my recommendations. I had the spreadsheets to prove it, the original purchase orders with my notes in the margins, the quarterly reviews showing which ones I'd advised sell, and which to keep. All of it documented, all of it dated, all of it mine. The tax returns filled 3 boxes, 38 years worth. Every one prepared by me, every deduction found by me, every form filled out in my neat handwriting. Hector had signed them, but I'd done the work. The business contracts were in another box. Hector's consulting firm had nearly been sued 3 times. 3 times I'd reviewed the contracts, found the loopholes, caught the problems before they became disasters. I wasn't on the payroll, but I'd been the legal counsel that kept his company alive. I spread it all out on the basement floor. 42 years of invisible work made visible, made undeniable, made real. In another box I found letters from Celestina, written in crayon and marker and eventually pen. Dear Mommy, you're the best mom in the world. Thank you for helping me with my science project. I love you more than chocolate. My hands shook holding those letters. Not from fear, from grief, from rage, from the kind of pain that has no name. When had I stopped being the best mom in the world? When had my daughter learned to look at me and see nothing worth keeping? The phone rang 3 times before I answered it. Desmond's voice came through smooth and confident. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm calling about the settlement offer. I remember, I said. The 72 hours expire tomorrow. After that we proceed to court. I want to give you one last chance to reconsider. I look. D at the evidence spread across the basement floor. At the proof of a life lived in service to others, at the documentation of everything I'd given up and everything I'd built in its place. Mr. Kincaid, I said, I'll see you in court. Mrs. Blackwood, I've never lost since. He stopped. Since I beat him. The words hung unspoken between us. You can't win this. You have no lawyer, no experience, no chance. See you in court, I repeated. Then I hung up. My hands didn't shake anymore, not even a little. The courthouse steps were concrete, cold even in the morning sun, each one an effort. My left knee ached with every step, arthritis that had gotten worse since Hector died. As if my body knew it didn't have to be strong anymore, didn't have to keep going for someone else. But I kept going anyway. 1 step, then another, the way I'd kept going for 42 years. Inside, the courthouse smelled like floor wax and paper and justice, or injustice, depending on which side of the courtroom you sat on. Celestina and Desmond were already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table like they owned it, like they owned everything. Her in a designer suit that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 6 months. Him in charcoal gray with a tie that matched his briefcase. They looked confident, comfortable, sure of their victory. I walked to the defendant's table alone, set down my folder of documents, the same folder I'd spent 2 weeks filling with evidence. The folder that held the truth of who I'd been and who I'd become. I'd chosen to represent myself, not because I wanted to, because I had to. Every penny of our money had been in Hector's name, handled by his financial advisor, kept in accounts I'd never touched. My monthly allowance barely covered groceries and household expenses. There was nothing left over for lawyers. Just a housewife. That's what the records showed. That's what Desmond would argue. That's what everyone would believe unless I could prove otherwise. Judge Morrison entered. We all stood. He was older than I remembered. Gray hair where there used to be brown. Lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 30 years ago. He'd been a clerk when I was prosecuting. A good one. Smart and careful and thorough. He gave no sign of recognizing me. Why would he? I was just another defendant, just another case on his docket, just another old woman fighting over money. Desmond stood for his opening statement. He walked to the center of the courtroom like a man who knew he'd already won, shoulders back, head high, every inch the successful lawyer he'd become. Your Honor, he began, this is a simple case, a clear-cut matter of law versus sentiment. My client, Celestina Blackwood, is the daughter of the deceased, Hector Blackwood. She seeks to contest a will that unfairly divides the estate between herself and her mother, Marguerite Blackwood. He gestured toward me, not looking at me, looking through me. The defendant made no financial contribution to this marriage. She never held a job, never earned a salary, never built anything of value. She simply existed within the shelter and protection her husband provided. The words landed like punches. Methodical, brutal, effective. Mrs. Blackwood was, by her own admission and by every record we have, a housewife. She cooked, she cleaned, she raised a child. Noble pursuits, perhaps, but not grounds for claiming half of an estate she did nothing to build. He paced as he talked, each step deliberate, practiced. The law is clear, Your Honor. Assets belong to those who earn them, to those who build them, to those who contribute financially to their accumulation. Emotional labor, while perhaps valuable in a personal sense, has no bearing on legal entitlement. Celestina nodded along, her face serious, righteous, convinced of her own virtue. My client is not being cruel, Desmond continued. She has offered her mother a generous settlement, $20,000, enough to secure a modest living space and provide for several years of comfortable retirement. All Mrs. Blackwood has to do is accept reality, accept that she has no legal claim to assets she never helped acquire. He turned to face me directly now. Existence is not grounds for inheritance, Your Honor. Mrs. Blackwood simply existed in this marriage. She never worked, she never earned, she never contributed anything beyond the basic domestic tasks that any person could have. He performed. The courtroom was quiet. Reporters took notes. The bailiff shifted his weight. Someone coughed in the back row. We ask that the court recognize the clear legal precedent here, Desmond said, that you uphold my client's right to the full inheritance her father intended for her, that you see the situation for what it is, a woman who contributed nothing now demanding everything. He sat down, smoothed his tie, exchanged a satisfied look with Celestina. Judge Morrison turned to me. Mrs. Blackwood, your opening statement? I stood slowly. My knee protested. I ignored it. Walked to the center of the courtroom where Desmond had just stood, the floor still warm from his shoes. Your Honor, I said. My voice didn't shake. May I call my first witness? Morrison looked surprised. His eyebrows lifted. You have witnesses, Mrs. Blackwood? Just one. I turned to look at Desmond, watched his confident smile falter. I'd like to call Desmond Kincaid to the stand. The courtroom went completely silent. No rustling papers, no shifting bodies, no sound at all except the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Desmond's face went blank, carefully blank, the look of a man trying not to show anything at all. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. I'm counsel for the plaintiff, and yet I'm calling you as a witness, I said. Unless you're refusing to testify? Morrison frowned. looked from Desmond to me and back again. Counselor, if you have relevant testimony, why? Or required to provide it. Desmond stood, slowly, like a man walking towards something he couldn't escape. He crossed to the witness stand. The bailiff swore him in. He sat down, his hands gripped the armrest tight enough to turn his knuckles white. I picked up my folder. 42 years of evidence, 42 years of proof, 42 years of a life lived in the shadows about to be dragged into the light. Mr. Kincaid, I said, do you recognize me? He cleared his throat. You're the defendant, Mrs. Blackwood. Before I was Mrs. Blackwood, did you know me? His jaw tightened, muscles jumping under the skin. Your Honor, I don't see the relevance. Answer the question, Counselor, Morrison said, his voice sharp, interested now. Desmond looked at me, really looked at me, not through me, not past me, at me. I watched the moment recognition hit, watched his eyes widen, watched the color drain from his face like water down a sink. It's you, he whispered, and that's when everything changed. Say my name, I told him, the words quiet but absolute, an order, a demand, a reckoning. His throat worked, his hands gripped tighter. Behind those expensive glasses, his eyes showed something close to panic. Marguerite Chen. The courtroom exploded. Reporters surged forward. Phones came out, fingers flying across keyboards. The judge banged his gavel, but the noise didn't stop. It grew, swelled, filled every corner of the room. Celestina looked from Desmond to me, her face a mask of confusion. Mom? What? Who is Marguerite Chen? But I kept my eyes on Desmond, watched him crumble, watched 30 years of carefully built confidence collapse like a house of cards in a strong wind. For the record, I said, loud enough to cut through the chaos. Can you tell the court who Marguerite Chen is? Judge Morrison slammed the gavel 3 more times, hard. The sound finally brought order. The reporters sat back down, the phones lowered. But everyone was leaning forward, everyone was listening. Desmond swallowed, loosened his tie with shaking fingers. She was the senior prosecutor who tried the Hernandez case, the biggest corruption trial in state history. And? I prompted. The words came out rough, honest, like they were being torn from somewhere deep inside him. The one who destroyed me in court 30 years ago. She was a legend, undefeated, 12 years, never lost a case. I was her first opponent after Harvard. She dismantled every argument I made, took apart my defense piece by piece until there was nothing left. My career nearly ended before it started. Celestina made a sound, halfway between a gasp and a sob. Her mascara was already starting to run. And after that case, I continued, my voice steady as stone, what did you do, Mr. Kincaid? He met my eyes. There was respect there now, and fear, and something that looked like shame. I spent the next 3 decades rebuilding my reputation, learning from that loss. Studying Eve. Wry move you made. Winning every case since then to prove I wasn't the fool you made me look like. I reached into my folder, pulled out the first document. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A, my law degree from Columbia University, graduated top of my class 1979. The bailiff took the paper, carried it to Judge Morrison. The judge studied it. His eyes widened, his face changed, recognition dawning. Exhibit B, I said, pulling out another document. My admission to the state bar. Exhibit C. My employment records from the district attorney's office showing 12 years of service as senior prosecutor. Each paper landed on the bailiff's desk like a small bomb. Exhibit D through Q, I continued. My case records, 12 years, 93 prosecutions, 93 convictions, not a single loss. The documents piled up. Physical proof, undeniable evidence. The truth made manifest. Celestina had gone pale. Her hands shook. The confidence from earlier completely gone. Mr. Kincaid, I said, turning back to him, you argued in your opening statement that I made no contribution to my marriage, that I never worked, that I simply existed. Is that correct? He couldn't seem to find words, just sat there, trapped, caught. Let me tell you what I actually did, I said, turning to face the full courtroom. I gave up a career that was paying me $200,000 a year in 1983. That's equivalent to over $500,000 today. I gave it up because my husband's job required constant travel, and our daughter needed a parent at home. I chose to be that parent. My voice didn't crack, didn't waver, years of courtroom experience holding steady. Exhibit R, I said, pulling out more documents. The financial analysis I did of our family's investments every quarter for 40 years. I have spreadsheets, Your Honor, detailed tracking of every stock purchase, every bond, every mutual fund. I recommended 70% of the investments that built this estate, the investments that my daughter now claims I had no part in creating. Desmond was staring at me like I'd risen from the dead, like the past had reached up and grabbed him by the throat. Exhibit S, the tax returns I prepared for 38 years. Exhibit T, the business contracts I reviewed for my husband's consulting firm. I may not have been on the payroll, but I was the legal counsel that kept his company from being sued into bankruptcy 3 separate times. 3 times I found the problems. 3 times I fixed them. 3 times I saved everything. I set down the last document, the folder empty now, everything revealed, everything exposed. I taught my daughter to read, I said. My voice cracking now, just a little, just enough. I taught her to tie her shoes. I sat through every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every soccer game. I was the one who stayed up all night when she had pneumonia at age 7. I was the one who helped her practice for TH. I was the one who drove her to college and helped her move into her dorm room. Celestina was crying openly now, mascara running down her face in black streams, ruining her perfect makeup, ruining her perfect case. I was just a housewife, I said. But before that, I was Marguerite Chen, and I gave up being her so that my daughter could have a mother, so she could have someone who showed up, someone who cared, someone who chose her over everything else. I thought that was a worthwhile trade. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing. Your Honor, I said, I'm not asking for charity, I'm not asking for pity, I'm asking for what the law says I'm entitled to. Half of an estate I helped build, half of a life I helped create, half of 42 years that I gave willingly, lovingly, and completely. I walked back to my table, sat down, my hands steady on the wood surface, my heart pounding in my chest, but my face calm, composed, the way it had been in 93 trials before this one. Judge Morrison looked at Desmond. Does the plaintiff wish to continue? Desmond stood, slowly, like a man who'd just been hit by a truck and was trying to figure out which bones were broken. He walked over to Celestina, leaned down, whispered something urgent in her ear. She shook her head violently. No, no, no. He kept talking, his voice too low for me to hear. But I could see her face, could see the moment she understood, the moment she really said she'd lost, the moment she knew she'd made a terrible mistake. Finally, she covered her face with her hands and nodded. Desmond straightened, turned to Judge Morrison. His voice came out formal, professional, defeated. Your Honor, the plaintiff withdraws her contest. We recognize Mrs. Blackwood's full right to her share of the estate as outlined in the original will. Morrison banged his gavel. Case dismissed. The original will stands. The reporters erupted again. Questions flying, cameras flashing, but I just gathered my documents, put them back in the folder, my hands moving slowly, carefully, the way they'd moved through 42 years of cooking and cleaning and caring. Desmond approached me as I was preparing to leave. Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Blackwood, I need to say something. I waited, didn't speak, just looked at him. I'm sorry, he said. The words genuine, real, not for the case I was doing my job, but for not recognizing you, for treating you like you were nothing, like you were nobody worth considering. He paused, swallowed. You taught me everything I know about law. That day you destroyed me in court. I went home and studied every move you made, every argument, every technique, every strategy. You made me who I am. You made me the lawyer I became. I know, I said. He looked startled. You knew? I followed your career, Mr. Kincaid. You're excellent. You became everything I saw in you that day when you were 25, and cocky and brilliant. But you forgot something important. What's that? I picked up my folder, held it against my chest like armor. Everyone has a story, even housewives. I walked past him, through the courtroom, through the doors, into the sunlight streaming through the courthouse windows. Behind me, I heard running footsteps. Mom, Mom, wait. I stopped, didn't turn around, just stood there at the top of the courthouse steps, the concrete cold under my feet, even through my shoes. Celestina caught up with me, out of breath, her face streaked with tears and ruined makeup. She looked younger somehow, stripped of all her certainty, all her designer confidence, all her righteous anger. "I didn't know," she said, the words tumbling out fast and desperate, "about who you were, about what you gave up, about any of it." "I never told you," I said, still not looking at her. "That was my choice." "Why didn't you?" Now I turned, looked at this woman I'd raised, this stranger I'd created. "Because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything. I wanted you to be free, to make your own choices, to live your own life without the weight of my sacrifices on your shoulders. But she stopped, started again. "I called you just a housewife." "Yes," I said, "you did." Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me?" I thought about that, about 42 years of breakfast and homework and birthday parties, about the career I'd loved and left behind, about the choice I'd made and whether I regretted it, about this daughter who'd grown up to see me as worthless, about whether love could survive being so thoroughly rejected. "I'm going home," I said finally, "to the house your father and I bought together, to the life we built. You're welcome to visit." Hope flickered in her eyes. "Really? But not because of inheritance or money or what you think you're owed," I continued. "Only if you want to know me, the real me. Marguerite Chen and Marguerite Blackwood, the prosecutor and the mother, the lawyer and the housewife, all of it. Not just the woman who made your lunch and did your laundry." I started down the steps, one at a time, my knee protesting with each movement, my back aching. I was 63 years old and I'd just won my 94th case. Behind me, Celestina's voice called out, "Mom?" I didn't turn around, but I didn't walk faster either, didn't speed up, didn't try to get away. Some things take time, some wounds need to breathe before they can heal. Some daughters need to find their way back home on their own, need to choose to come back rather than being pulled or pushed or guilted into it. I'd wait, that's what mothers do. We wait, we hope, we keep the door unlocked even when our hearts are breaking. We forgive even when it hurts, we love even when that love gets thrown back in our faces. Even the mothers who used to be legends, even the women who gave up everything, even the housewives who were never just anything at all. The afternoon sun was warm on my face as I reached the bottom of the steps. My car was parked 2 blocks away, 2 blocks of walking with a bad knee and an aching back, 2 blocks of carrying the weight of 42 years and 94 victories. But I'd walked harder roads, carried heavier burdens, survived worse pain. I was Marguerite Chen. I was Marguerite Blackwood. I was a prosecutor and a mother and a wife and a woman who'd learned that sometimes the hardest cases to win are the ones where you're fighting for your own worth. And I'd won. Again. If you've ever been called worthless, if you've ever had someone look at you and see nothing of value, if you've ever sacrificed everything, only to watch someone try to erase your contributions, then you know this truth. Your worth was never in their hands. It was always in yours. To anyone fighting their own battle right now, to anyone who's been counted out or overlooked or called just anything, remember this. The people who underestimate you today will remember you tomorrow. Your story isn't over, your power isn't gone. Your worth isn't determined by how visible you are, but by what you've built, who you've loved, and how you stand up when someone tries to make you disappear. What lesson hit you hardest from this story, and if you were in my shoes, would you have fought back or accepted that settlement? Keep watching, click the next video on your screen right now and see another powerful story from our channel. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one.